It seems like right now, Ordinals is moving towards this direction of kind of this wrapped future where you're taking these assets and putting it into various protocols in whatever the equivalent of the wrapped is, whether it's something on Bitcoin where you're going to have different indexers determining the different rule set of these type of assets, or putting it in something like a vault. Do you think that's where the future of Ordinals is going?
I think within the crypto ecosystem, if you're looking to onboard additional crypto users, then I think the existing, even just building 100% on Bitcoin with the existing PSBT marketplaces and existing wallets, I think we have the infrastructure needed for the crypto savvy user. So I think Ordinals could easily grow to all crypto savvy users in the next 1 to 2 years without any scaling solutions. And I think that's just going to be attracting builders and attracting collectors and attracting businesses to come and launch on Bitcoin.
Bob is in the house. Oh man, I'm excited for this conversation. This is pretty much just a few days after Bob had put out a very cool piece called Bitcoin Layers, which discovers all of the different components of Bitcoin. And Bob has been one of our friends on and one of the regulars on all of the Ordinal Twitter Spaces, but now we finally get to dive into some more intimate and focused discussion for somebody who does a very good job at explaining some of the technically dense things that you're building. Bob's also the founder of Bioniq, which is I don't know if you call it L2 sidechain marketplace is what you saw, but I know you mentioned the terminology is kind of all over the place.
Yeah. So, co-founder and CEO of Bioniq. I would call ICP a sidechain under current definitions. Those definitions vary depending on who you talk to. So probably going to have to invent new words to describe exactly what's going on here. But yeah, all the benefits of a sidechain, smart contracts, faster transaction times, lower or no fees, and better user experience. So really excited about Bioniq. We're doing end-to-end testing right now this week and next week, and things are looking pretty good. So hoping to launch very soon. And it will be the first dedicated Ordinals Marketplace on a Bitcoin sidechain or L2.
I didn't know that ICP is considered a sidechain. And how is that, before we do dive into some of everything about your past and all of that stuff, how is that a sidechain? I just remember ICP came out as like a top 5 cryptocurrency by market cap and has been down only since then and has been a butt of a lot of meme jokes.
Yep. Yeah, so between Insane Clown Posse and the bad launch, that's what most people understand about ICP. The best way to understand ICP is as decentralized web services blockchain. So take, Amazon Web Services, they offer compute, hosting, and storage. Now do that in a decentralized way, and that's what ICP is trying to do. So it all depends on your definition of sidechain. This is something that I've come to realize over the last couple of weeks, and that's in the Bitcoin ecosystem, the terminology used is like sidechain and layer 2. And in Ethereum, the terminology used is sidechain and layer 2. But they actually mean completely different things depending on the ecosystem that you're in, which kind of blows my mind. Like I thought we would have consistent terminology here. So when I say sidechain, I mean a separate blockchain, not part of Bitcoin or Ethereum, that allows you to bridge, two-way peg Bitcoin over to the sidechain in order to leverage the benefits of the sidechain. So if you define sidechain like that, then you see that, Cosmos and NBTC, like Cosmos is a sidechain, or Ethereum is a Bitcoin sidechain because you can bridge Bitcoin over to WBTC and interact with it programmatically with Ethereum smart contracts. So this is maybe a more expansive definition of a sidechain than traditionally used in the Bitcoin community, but is fairly common in like the Ethereum community, for example. So yeah.
I've been doing my own research as well. You kind of beat me to the punch, but coming from the historical NFT space with Adam McBride and Leo, we used to get into these debates consistently about what is the true definition of vintage versus historical archaeology in NFT archaeology in a time where the entire ecosystems only existed for 12 years at the time. I've come to learn there's never going to be a true de facto definition, but if you can understand it, depending on which culture you're interacting with, you'll probably make a lot more progress of pushing the conversation forward than just trying to, use it serendipitously between the bunches. It is a quite fascinating situation to begin with. And I do appreciate you for doing the layers, and I'm going to be using it in my write-up that'll be coming out probably in a few weeks as well. But let's just start from the beginning, man. We were first introduced, I think, on the Ordinal show or one of the Ordinal spaces in the early days. You came in as somebody in a similar position to me working at Emblem Vault that is like this believer in cross-chain, functionality, and that most people are going to end up being multi-chain. And so it's not as important to, be tribalistic as it is to go experiment. How did you find yourself in this position as, being one of the kind of leading bodies, no pun intended?
Yeah. So if we go back really far, I did undergrad in neuroscience. I did PhD in educational technology. Just getting a PhD in and of itself is like, this monumental thing where you learn more about a specific topic than anyone else in the world, essentially. If you take all of human knowledge as a big circle, then a PhD is like a tiny blip on that circle where you're expanding what is known, what is known by humanity. But a lot of those skills are extremely transferable to other domains. And so from PhD, I did data engineering, data science for a couple of years for various tech startups, then got sucked into blockchain, wanted to build my first ed tech blockchain app back in 2017. We wanted to build a really interesting learning application, but we wanted to build it 100% on chain. So we wanted to host it on chain. We wanted the backend to be on chain. 2017 was a little early to try to do something like that. So it didn't really work out. Like we weren't able to get things working, but that's when did a really big deep dive into Bitcoin, into Ethereum, into other kind of scaling solutions. And then I've been building for the last 2 years on ICP, Internet Computer Protocol. And so we have the parent company for Bioniq is Tonic. Tonic is the company, and we have the largest NFT marketplace on ICP. There are some interesting Bitcoin, I'll call them like protocol advancements that have happened in the last year on the ICP side. And because of those, and because of, the rise of Ordinals, we've been almost 100% focused on Ordinals since early February. I think it was like February 6th was the day when I had seen enough already from the Ordinals ecosystem to know that like it was going to be absolutely massive. And I think we're maybe starting to scratch the surface of it, but probably not even yet. So yeah, and then since then been building a lot. I've always been technical, but also extremely curious and love to learn new things. And so, the crazy, I'll say crazy because, you can do all sorts of stuff on Bitcoin, a big decentralized protocol. There's tons you can do on it and there's tons of people doing tons of things. And so that was like my perfect playground for like, technical, curious, driven, ambitious person to just go in and learn tons of things about how it all works. So yeah.
So without diving into Bioniq specifically, knowing by early February that this is where you wanted to build, identifying, of course, simple things like Bitcoin's the largest market cap. So therefore there's a huge opportunity just from, simple analysis. But on the other side, what hurdles do you think Ordinals has to overcome, or maybe what are some points to where ICP is required to trade frictionlessly on a side chain to where you wanted to dedicate the last 6 months to?
One of the things I love to do is I look at a technology and I look at the affordances of the technology. The affordances meaning like dive in, understand how the tech works, and then see how it does things better than other tech that exists. The reason that I focus and I talk about technology like this is because in the education space, we have a long history of new technology that was promised to revolutionize the, education landscape. And it started from like the radio to the television, to the computer, to the internet, to now like AI or other things. And every time the claims were just from people that saw a new flashy piece of tech and thought, oh, this is going to dramatically change everything, when really the answer is more nuanced and more, you needed a deeper understanding to really grasp that technology. And so when I look at blockchain, when I look at NFTs, when I look at ordinals, I do the same kind of analysis. Like a lot of people really jump on the hype, the hype train and just really want to go hard on the latest shining, coin or token or blockchain. But if you look at it from like a foundational technology perspective, Ordinals gives you pay once, store forever storage on a decentralized network in a way that we haven't really ever maybe seen. I don't know anyone else that does pay once, store forever storage better than Ordinals on Bitcoin.
There is on-chain on Ethereum, though. Have you explored that?
So do you mean like storing in smart contracts on Ethereum?
Yeah. So for example, like CryptoPunks and Mooncats now, I think over the last 2 years, I think it was about 2 years ago, stored everything on chain. So I think you could reassemble all of the images through the vector files. Have you explored that at all?
It's just more expensive to do on Ethereum. Smart contract storage on Ethereum is more expensive than Ordinals, than storing data on Bitcoin. And you have the need for a smart contract. And so there are some like complexities with doing something like that. So you could do it on Ethereum, you're right. Similarly, like Ethscriptions is interesting in that same vein, where it's like a pay once, store forever. But you know, the beauty of Bitcoin is just it's like the grandfather blockchain. And so storage on Bitcoin, it just is a really sound medium of storage. I mean, even like Arweave, I think Arweave has perma storage. Perma storage is like a pay once, store forever. Depends on their like token price and things like that to secure the network. But that's, I think, one of the key affordances of Ordinals is a really practical pay once, store forever model that's relatively affordable and extremely durable. And we haven't seen that anywhere. And so from just like bringing new things to market perspective, I think there's a use case that it's valuable just from the use case alone.
So what would you say then is the largest challenge of Ordinals moving forward to where everything can't and likely won't exist on Bitcoin, for example, like marketplaces and certain types of tooling? What are you building to overcome that you're foreseeing as kind of this immovable object?
Yeah, I mean, to dig into some of this, like I'm going to talk kind of about some like fundamental issues with blockchain generally, I think. So one example is like our current wallet infrastructure. If you look at the MetaMasks or the Phantoms or other wallets in the space, just seed phrase based wallets, even cold storage wallets like Ledger and others, like the user experience is so poor for regular internet using people. And I think we need to 10x to 100x the user experience on the private key management side. And I think this needs to happen not just for Ordinals, this needs to happen for Ethereum L2s, for rollups, for everyone. Like we need better, more usable private key infrastructure. This means like maybe not seed phrase based, maybe it's, there are lots of potential options here, but I think that's one area where like if Ordinals is going to grow, I think it just naturally it will grow similar as like, Ethereum NFTs. I mean, we're kind of in the bear of the bear right now. Like I think Ordinals will succeed on Bitcoin regardless of what happens to wallet infrastructure. I think we need to continue to build, we need more infrastructure, we need to bring more people into the ecosystem. If we want to, that's kind of like a phase one, like, general success, as much as we've seen like success on Ethereum or others. But if we're going to get like massive success, then I think we need to kind of 10 to 100x the user experience before we can start to get there.
Agreed. Definitely agree. I know there's, depending on which ecosystem you're participating in, they all have their different issues. Some common other ones are central indexers, right? Depending on if you're playing with BRC20 or Bitmap or SNS or all these other ones, right? It's kind of these closed garden systems, which kind of have this degree of start with centralization and then hopefully improve to decentralization. Of course, the longer block times on Bitcoin of 10 minutes definitely hurts those kind of frequency traders who are doing kind of lots of trades in a short amount of time. Obviously, that can't happen in the UTXO model, but I'm assuming Bioniq is attempting to solve this in a sort of way through Marketplace. So can you just describe what improvements Bioniq has made to trading Ordinals on Bitcoin?
Yeah. So my main goal is let's make Bitcoin better with ICP, or let's make Bitcoin better, by building Bioniq. So currently, we have our Explorer live. You can view it just on bioniq.io. That's Bioniq with a Q, like you can see. And so we have a built-in wallet coming we couldn't just like add in Xverse or Hero or Unisat because we need to handle transactions on the Bitcoin side as well as on the wrapped Bitcoin side. So because of that, we'll have a built-in wallet. And then the main benefits for building on a sidechain like ICP is you get faster transaction time. So you get about 5-second finality on all transactions. And you also get lower fees. So on Bitcoin, you'll pay network fees. On Ethereum, you'll pay gas fees. On ICP, you don't pay fees at all. It has a reverse gas model, which means that the developer who deployed the smart contract is responsible for keeping that smart contract, for covering the gas costs for that smart contract, essentially. And then you also get a benefit in terms of user experience. And so for our marketplace, we're going to be using Web3 Auth as the authentication mechanism. That means you can log in with MetaMask, or you can log in with Gmail, or you can log in, with Wallet Connect. Like there are lots of login methods, and you don't have to get a new browser extension wallet. Like we just have a wallet that's just built in. Again, partly because we had to facilitate both sides of the wrapping process, but also it just makes it really easy for let's say I'm a Robinhood user and I hold Bitcoin on Robinhood and I want to test out things in the ordinal space. It would be really easy for them to just send some Bitcoin over to their Bioniq wallet and they're ready to go. It's a one-click transaction to convert from Bitcoin to wrapped Bitcoin. And there's no third token that you need for wrapping. You don't have to have, Ethereum to pay gas costs, or you can just do everything in Bitcoin. So you can pay the conversion fee in Bitcoin itself. So really easy wrapping process, really nice user experience, easy to onboard. These are all the things that we're trying to target.
So if you're wrapping something, who is taking custody of that wrap? Is this something that is permissionless or trustless? Does Bioniq take any type of custody or control over these assets? And the reason why I ask is because, as you know, on Bitcoin, there's a high degree of preference for decentralization, permissionless, trustless, everything that has to do with being a sovereign individual. But as we know as builders, this isn't always the case, at least to start. It's always this kind of path towards decentralization, because the majority of projects, I could say quite confidently, will never have that type of decentralized beginning as Bitcoin did. So is there any sacrifices that Bioniq has to make in order to, build towards this decentralized future?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So initially, obviously, there are some additional trust assumptions by moving from Bitcoin to ICP. So you have, you're adding a new blockchain. And so you have some trust assumptions associated with the new blockchain. We are very aware of the value of decentralization, permissionlessness, trustlessness, not just from a technical perspective, but a community perspective, but also a legal perspective. There are some complications on the legal side, depending on how you architect your marketplace. And so initially our goal is it's basically multi-sig controlled everywhere. By that, I mean, the actual entity that is holding assets will be a smart contract on ICP, and that smart contract on ICP will be a multi-sig controlled smart contract. And so even our marketplace methods, anything on the auction side or the offers side, we'll have auctions and offers launch, or the marketplace or the wrapping side, it will all be multi-sig controlled initially.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's tough building in this space. And as you know, from this Bitcoin layers chart that you did that I just pulled up here, you could see all of the different types of attempts that builders have used in order to leverage Bitcoin in some sort of capacity to build out their protocol, which then can be the harbor for whatever NFT equivalent ecosystem they built, right? With meta protocols like Omni and RGB, you have counterparty and stamps, right? Then you go to these things like sidechains and cross-chain bridges and, protocol upgrades and layer twos. In this tweet, you said that it took you hundreds of hours to build this. First, and just to begin this conversation, what inspired you to put a chart together to help really simplify the understanding as much as possible of how builders are utilizing Bitcoin?
Yeah, part of it was, since I'm building on ICP, I felt like I really needed to have a deep understanding of all of the layers on Bitcoin so that I could I really like to look at something in an objective way and look at the pros and cons of the various technologies. And so there are trust assumptions and pros and cons with building on ICP, just like there are trust assumptions with building on stacks or on Ethereum or on, leveraging Lightning or building on meta protocols. And so it was, I started digging on like stacks, started talking to a lot of people from the stacks side, really, really fantastic builders in the stacks ecosystem, really, really like a lot of people on the stack side. And then started talking to Albert at the Bitcoin Startup Lab. And he wanted me to do kind of like a nice presentation on Bitcoin layers for all of the cohorts going through. And so then I started thinking a little bit more closely about, okay, what is, if I had to represent in picture form the Bitcoin landscape, what would it look like? And so then started talking to a lot of different people, diving into various different protocols to understand how they work. And that resulted in this graphic, which honestly in and of itself is not the right graphic. Like it's not the culmination of all of the knowledge like I wanted it to be. I think on the meta protocol side, people are fine. On the Bitcoin side, people are fine. On the sidechain, cross-chain bridge layer 2 side, I got tons of feedback there saying, well, stack should be here, or rootstock should actually be here, or, this is actually better for these reasons, or Lightning is technically not a layer 2, it should be somewhere else. So thinking through, like, there's probably a second version that I need to do that just better characterizes all of these different layers. But yeah, that's kind of how it came to be, was just trying to bring it all together in a way that people could understand at a glance.
Yeah, this is, like I said, as I was building something similar to this as well, you begin to learn how much is under the hood, but also like not how much has been built over its history. It's kind of strange how there's these kind of dull periods, but there's these cool technologies. And I'll use it for example, like PSBTs and DLCs. They were first proposed in 2018, but they're really not they didn't find any traction really until now, until Ordinals came around.
I mean, even Ordinals could have been built on SegWit. You don't even need Taproot to do Ordinals. And so we could have had Ordinals in 2017 on Bitcoin, but we didn't until, 2023 or, 2022. So yeah, crazy how things play out.
And wrapping this, I guess, this section up, what did you learn compiling all this together and interacting with all of the different communities on Bitcoin? Is there any commonalities you've seen between the technologies and the communities that are something to note?
Yeah, I think a couple big learnings. One is sovereign rollups are really, really cool and solve a lot of the centralization issues with indexers. I had a lot of really awesome conversations there. Another learning is the ZK future looks way different than the current landscape. So, my next project might be like what survive, like assuming that we get zero knowledge on Bitcoin, what does the future look like then? Because it's completely different than how it looks right now. Like there are some pretty crazy implications there. Other learnings like drive chain, space chain, soft chains get talked about quite a bit actually from different people, but there isn't a single one in production. That's why they're in the dotted section. Then let's see, what were some of my other takeaways? I learned a lot about the various ways in which you can have connections to Bitcoin. So for example, Liquid, I put initially in the cross-chain bridges section. Liquid is almost built using the same model as Bitcoin, meaning the same code. You could run a node in the same way. They use a UTXO model. It's almost like Bitcoin, just it's not Bitcoin. And so even though you have to bridge to Liquid, you have a lot of built-in interoperability with Liquid. And so, what do you call that? Like, yeah, you have to bridge your Bitcoin to get there, but Liquid is almost like Bitcoin itself. And so in a way, it has a lot of interoperability benefits that you wouldn't get from other chains. Or like Rootstock with like merged mining, being able to be associated with Bitcoin in that way is interesting. Or like Stacks, where Stacks hosts a hash of all of their blocks on Bitcoin and also requires you to send Bitcoin to be considered to mine the next block. And so Stacks, Rootstock, Liquid have these interesting connections to Bitcoin in ways that aren't fully represented here. So yeah, those are some of the learnings.
Yeah, merge mining.
Lots of fun stuff.
It's very interesting because a lot of it just gets, swept under the rug or not discussed. I mean, in this case, if merge mining is considered a side chain, something as early as Namecoin is also merged mine with Bitcoin. So would that also be considered
Right.
something as a side chain it's always something really fascinating to think about. But going back to Bioniq and ICP, do you feel, obviously you're building here with ICP for Bitcoin and for Ordinals, is this the best path forward, or is this more of just something to learn and kind of show others that, not everything has to exist on Bitcoin? There are safe ways and more efficient ways to utilize the assets that are created over there.
Yeah, good question. I think the way I might answer it is looking at the future of blockchain. And the future that I see is if you have a chain that excels in a particular use case that solves a problem that people care about better than any other solution, then you have a winning chain. And if that chain can properly communicate and interact with the existing ecosystem, then it feels like a winner. And I'm okay with a multi-chain future. Different blockchains with various trust assumptions and different pros and cons working together to solve real problems that people care about. I mean, that's kind of what we've always been trying to do here in crypto. So when I look at a blockchain like ICP, I think that if it can do things better than other blockchains, for example, like you could host a front end directly on an ICP smart contract. That's very convenient in lots of different circumstances. Like you could host a website on IPFS, for example, that's going to have some limitations and some drawbacks. But like that's one interesting use case where like, yeah, if you can do that on ICP, then, why would you ever want to use something like AWS when it's just so much better? And the other thing that I'll layer this with is I think eventually, thinking about like the 10-year horizon for blockchain, I think eventually the tech is just going to fade into the background. If you think about like internet protocols like TCP/IP, HTTP, other standards, you don't really have to care about them at all if you just want to load up Facebook on your phone. And so I think in blockchain, the same thing will happen where chain will become less important once things start to become interoperable and you have different tech that can do different things. So, imagine all the tech disappears and you're just left with a really awesome solution to a problem that people are willing to pay for. And you have a viable business, you have product market fit, and that's a successful implementation. Obviously, there are lots of considerations here with like Web 2.5 kinds of ideas where you have part centralization, part decentralization. I'm obviously fighting on the more decentralized side. Like, let's see how far we can push this. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts.
I'd say the largest consideration or the difference between Web 2 and Web 3 would be kind of this incentive model. It's easy for, some of the early internet protocols like TCP/IP is what it is, you said? TCP, right? To fade into the background. But here, Ethereum has a token and it has communities that are using, this network token to participate in it, which kind of imbues this sense of tribalism because they want to kind of dominate. They want to feel ownership over this protocol. They own a piece of it, right? There's a lot more speculation that's in the game. Do you look at this and then think there's a way to overcome this, or this sense of tribalism and kind of this network state, as Balaji Srinivasan would put it? Do you take those incentive models into consideration?
Yeah, I mean, it's very apparent that you have tribalism within blockchains to the point where you have different words or you have the same word that means different things across ecosystems. It's also crazy that, like, talking to people at Stacks, there are so many similarities between what Stacks is trying to do and what ICP is trying to do. Obviously, there are differences, different people coming from different backgrounds, building for different use cases, but in a lot of ways, it's just like, think about all the parallel universes in blockchain right now. Like all of these smart people trying to work towards, you could argue, the same future, but we're doing it in like isolation. And I think it's hard to get around that, except that in the Bitcoin case, I've almost felt that it's breaking down walls in a lot of cases. Like the Ordinals ecosystem is a perfect example of like a blockchain melting pot where you have people from everywhere, like Stacks, Ethereum, Solana, Hedera, like name the chain, and you probably have influences into the ordinal space. Even builders from BSV and other Bitcoin forks, and people coming together building on Bitcoin. And there's definitely tribalism that exists, but I don't know. I think collaboration is greater than competition in this case. I know that there are some efforts behind the scenes right now between ICP and Stacks from like the foundation level to see if we can collaborate, whether it's, pick some awesome thing like witness encryption, for example, like people doing research on witness encryption. Witness encryption would be really awesome for lots of reasons. And, we should get a whole community of people across chain to work towards building together. Or maybe there are ways that certain chains can leverage their unique abilities to contribute to this, cross-chain future.
Yeah.
So
I completely agree. At Emblem, we have that same type of idea, is that you're going to be able, for us, it's just, you're going to need to move assets between chains. And as I try to look at blockchains as countries, and then you kind of look at like dApps as kind of these different cities. And then you have the NFTs in crypto, which is the currency system and the non-fungible system. And just like in the real world, you're going to take assets from one country and move it to the other for whatever reason, whether it's, better, they have better vehicles, they have better materials, they're resource rich, right? Which is, I guess, what Bitcoin would be with the mining component. There's so many different, situations to it. But you did kind of hit the nail on the head. And I think this is something a handful of us in the Bitcoin community have kind of been circling around, is that Ordinals is a melting pot of many different communities. Mostly that came from NFTs. Maybe it started out with the NFT degens from Ethereum and Solana, and Bitcoin SV as the builders is kind of interesting. But most of those people who are trading Ordinals also trade on a different ecosystem. So for what we're building, you do want to entice, the older holders, I guess, of Bitcoin who have like a large allotment of the supply. But those who are actively participating in Ordinals have no issues with multi-chain future. And to be honest, when I interact with them, they don't even call it a multi-chain future. They're just participating in blockchain. They don't really see it as one another. So for Bioniq, you are introducing kind of this blockchain that's been underutilized since inception, although it kind of has a big name for mimetic value and other reasons. How do you approach those users who have never used ICP to say, hey, this is probably a better alternative than any of the other bridging solutions, or there's something here that needs to be explored?
Yeah, from a user experience perspective, the beauty of Bioniq is users don't even need to know. They don't need to own ICP. They don't need ICP for anything. They'll never see the ICP written out or the logo anywhere. It's completely abstracted away. Bioniq is built as, a Bitcoin Ordinals Marketplace. And so the wallet, you can just hold Bitcoin. You can hold wrapped Bitcoin. You can hold Ordinals. You can hold wrapped Ordinals, and you could transact on the marketplace. And so the technical users, of course, are going to want to know, what are we building on and how are we building, and what, who controls our smart contracts and who takes custody of user assets, and how does the Bitcoin bridge work and what are the assumptions there. But for all of the other users, like you were saying, it's going to be really easy. You just send Bitcoin in, you just convert it to wrapped Bitcoin, and you're good to go. And so from it almost doesn't even feel like you're going across chain. I mean, yeah, you have to convert your Bitcoin to the wrapped Bitcoin, but otherwise, you're basically just going to a different marketplace to buy and sell Ordinals.
And as I was exploring the website earlier when we were talking, it looks like it's just the equivalent of NFT trading. Is there a future to where it can be home to BRC20s and bitmaps and some of these other trends or emerging technologies in the Ordinal ecosystem? Can that be applied to Bioniq?
Yeah. So there are some hurdles to doing it in a wrapped form, like I'm sure you're well aware of at Emblem Vault. What I'm most excited about, this is like it might be 12-month kind of roadmap on the protocol side for ICP, but I really want to build a decentralized Ordinals indexer on ICP. ICP smart contracts have basically everything you need to have a decentralized indexer. You have HTTP out calls, so you can grab Bitcoin blocks. There's even a way to do a layer of consensus across nodes, so you're not relying on a single Bitcoin node. Then you can just process everything in nice high-level language like TypeScript or Python. You can use either of those as a smart contract language on ICP. And then you're going to want to spin up some kind of API of sorts, host like an ordinal server. And you can do that directly in the smart contract itself. You can just spin up endpoints that you hit, and those can even be HTTP endpoints because you can serve front ends on ICP. So that means you could have a fully decentralized ordinals indexer that is actually governed by some community where you actually can't even push protocol changes without people voting on it. And you could do that for ordinals. You could do it for BRC20. You could do it for bitmap. Like any of these protocols could have fully decentralized indexers built on ICP, which I think is really, really interesting. And it's all possible right now. All of the tech is already there. Someone just has to, take the time and build it out. So that's one thing that I'm interested in continuing to push for.
Yeah, well, if Domo's listening right now, I know that he's exploring it with Alex Bridge through Stacks. From my understanding, it's impossible or pretty much impossible to do an on-chain indexer on Bitcoin L1, at least from what I've been explained, or it's highly expensive or there's some type of issues. It does seem like a decentralized indexer is next, especially going back to the earlier conversation. If you want some of these older or longer held Bitcoin to be put into circulation, to be, quote unquote, put your money to work, there has to be this like almost frictionless environment that's trustless, and there's no trust assumptions. But it does sound, too good to be true. Is there any downsides of using ICP for a decentralized indexer? Or is there even a possibility of, hey, Domo goes and builds a decentralized indexer on Stacks, Bob builds a decentralized indexer on ICP? Will both of those have the same exact information, and can they be used concurrently? Or is there, because they're different sidechain versus L2, they will produce a different product?
No, same product, just different tech. It's likely going to be different trust assumptions because building something like this on Stacks is extra hard. Extra hard because you have Clarity. Clarity is a simpler language, simpler intentionally to be more secure, but that also means less powerful and, harder to do certain things with. Also, Stack smart contracts the path forward there feels like you're still going to have some significant points of centralization. Like, I don't know how you would do it otherwise. Where like on the ICP side, you could do it to where your only trust assumptions are those of the protocol itself. Meaning you could have a full Bitcoin node hosted on ICP. And once you do that, like you could have a full Bitcoin node hosted on ICP and all of the meta protocols on top, ordinals plus, the gamut of JSON protocols. And at that point, obviously there are going to be costs associated with that. What is it, like 600 gigs ish? For a Bitcoin full node? I know a SAT's ordinals index is, I don't know what, like eight gigs. And I know that ordinals index with the SAT index is like 100 gigs. So you're talking about, almost a terabyte, maybe 750 of storage space, which isn't cheap to store anywhere. So there are definitely some cost considerations there. But assuming you can, solve that problem, obviously I'm biased because I'm building on ICP, but I think ICP is the best place for a decentralized indexer. And it's not because I love ICP. It's because ICP has the best primitives at the protocol layer to support something like this. So it just feels easier to build on ICP than it does to build anywhere else.
Have you did mention that Stacks Foundation and the equivalent of the ICP Foundation are maybe discussing some type of interoperability. Have you personally spoken with anybody from the ICP community, maybe on the foundation side, about this like massive opportunity to basically build within the Bitcoin ecosystem? Or support it, I should say.
Yeah, I talk to them all the time. It's the Dfinity Foundation. I talk with the Dfinity Foundation all the time, probably more than they would like. But we are starting a Bitcoin working group where it'll just be focused on how can we make Bitcoin better with ICP. And some of those initiatives include like a decentralized ordinals indexer. Some of them include like a BRC20 token wrapper, where you could, deposit your BRC20s into an ICP smart contract, and then it would just mint you fungible token. And it would just be a fungible token, and you could do whatever you wanted with it, leverage all of the existing DeFi type tooling on ICP to do, whatever you want. Like we could even enable buying and selling with BRC20s as a currency in our marketplace. So yeah, lots of interesting initiatives on that side. And there's grant money. If there's someone listening that's, really gung-ho, wants to come in, if they're like a TypeScript or a Rust or a Python dev, If they want to come in and build tech on ICP, there are grants. I think that it's normally like a 5K, 10K, 25K, 100K kind of stepping stone where it's milestone based. So you say, hey, I'm going to do this. Once I do it, you get like X% of your grant funding. So I think there's grant money to fund this work, and we're just getting the ball rolling here.
Yeah, it's very, very awesome to see. And then just stepping back and speculating, on the future, what do you think is the future of Bitcoin and Ordinals? It seems like right now Ordinals is moving towards this direction of kind of this wrapped future where you're taking these assets and putting it into various protocols in whatever the equivalent of the wrapped is, or derivative or synthetic, right? Whether it's something on Bitcoin where you're gonna have different indexers determining the different rule set of these type of assets, or putting it in something like a vault or onto ICP, right? Or moving it to L2 and stacks. Do you think that's where the future of Ordinals is going?
By future, you mean like the next year, or do you mean like 10 years?
Let's play. We have a memory of a goldfish, so let's play like 1 to 2 years.
It's a tricky question, and there isn't, nobody really knows.
This is why we Bob. This is why we get to have this conversation and have fun and speculate. Well, let's say then maybe like, what is your perspective, or where do you see all of this going?
Yeah, I think within the crypto ecosystem, if you're looking to onboard additional crypto users, then I think the existing, even just building 100% on Bitcoin with the existing PSBT marketplaces and existing wallets, I think we have the infrastructure needed for the crypto savvy user. So I think Ordinals could easily grow to all crypto savvy users in the next 1 to 2 years without any scaling solutions. I mean, people have been doing it on Ethereum for a year, 2 or 3. Or 4 or 6. And so I think there's definitely opportunity there to just scale within the crypto ecosystem. Everyone should own Ordinals, whether you're on Solana or Ethereum or, some other chain. And I think that's just going to be attracting builders and attracting collectors and attracting businesses to come and, launch on Bitcoin. And none of that per se needs any kind of scaling solutions. I mean, we've lived this long without, any kind of NFT activity on any layer 2s on Ethereum mostly. And so, yeah, I think the benefits of adding layers is you get additional functionality. I know a lot of builders are trying to do cool things with BRC20s and ordinals and swaps and loans and trades and all sorts of things. And those, while they may be possible, it's just really hard to do it in a good way. Like if you look at the on-chain monkey dimensions drop, you could, I don't think I have enough fingers on my hands to count the number of firsts from that drop in terms of just all of the interesting ways that they leveraged Bitcoin to pull it off. And I think we'll find that a lot more is possible on Bitcoin than we thought, now or even 6 months ago. But I think it'll be a lot easier to do all of these things when you have a more powerful programmable layer to build on. And so building on something like ICP, for example, it's going to be a lot easier to build these solutions than to architect it on Bitcoin. Danny at On-Chain Monkey, like the master Bitcoin builder, it probably took a really long time to architect their launch setup. But if you look at what they did and compare it to like what people do on Ethereum, it's like, pretty run of the mill kind of launch. So what was like extremely innovative and new on Bitcoin is kind of just a par on Ethereum. And so as people look to scale up what they're trying to do, not just from like an innovation perspective, but just like trying to, well, maybe from an innovation perspective, I think naturally people will want to go to where you can build new cool things the fastest.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head and loved every aspect of it. There's so many variations from things that we haven't even discussed. Like I think it's called like smart Bitcoin or Bitcoin cities, like a whole different protocol, which is leveraging smart contracts. You have a whole rootstock and sovereign and that whole DeFi ecosystem, and more is going to continually pop up. And you learn, and I've figured this out over my career within crypto, is that most users, maybe sad to say or not to say, don't care as much about decentralization as they do about permissionless. And that's kind of, the middle of the bell curve, is they just want to be able to go in and out of something and be able to build, and somebody doesn't have to tell them no, but them knowing, that something could be repossessed, it's maybe not their number one priority in terms of security, because they could be in a different life circumstance than most of us are that, got into Bitcoin early and kind of grew with this kind of decentralized ethos of being the sovereign individual. It's got to understand the practicality of life quality and life experience when participating in the ecosystem. But Bob, I appreciate you for coming on, man. As conversation always lived up to what I expected and more. We didn't go too deep down the technical rabbit hole. Maybe next time we do, we'll have to talk even more about what's under the hood about ICP and Bioniq and even Tonic and everything more. So appreciate you for sharing your brilliant time and mind with us.
Yeah, thanks so much. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you guys for listening and watching. We'll catch you next time.